Hi, Jeffrey. Welcome to MovieJunk. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And Jeffrey, I'm going to do my best to, keep my inner kid from coming in. Back to the Future is one of my all-time film franchises just ever, right? So,
One
super
of mine too.
amazing, amazing, right? And you play, you're very popularly known as George McFly in the second and third films, but also, I mean, you have quite an extensive career, right? With over 40 years in the business and over 80 credits to your name. You've also been in films such as Pill Rider with Clint Eastwood. I can't thank you enough for joining us today.
Yeah, actually, this is my 50th year since I took to the stage. I think it was in 1972 when I was in. Uh, I'm an old guy. I took to the stage in seventh grade in school. I had done a few things as even a younger kid, Parks and Rec, community stuff, and then, but in junior high and seventh grade, that's when I really started taking it somewhat seriously.
Absolutely.
50 years. Yikes.
50, and it just probably feels like it just went by super fast, right? Or can you remember every part of it?
Oh yeah, I remember everything. It's very clear. I remember some. I have visual help sometimes.
Yeah.
I'll bring out the visual aids in a little bit and narrate them. My first guest star spot on television was on a series called The Scarecrow and Mrs. King, and then I've had work on Dallas and Max Headroom, stuff back in the 80s. Then in the 90s, Diagnosis Murder, Saved by the Bell, The Man Show. I've done some television, lots of commercials. I probably, because I'm currently in the process of looking for a new place to live, maybe moving back to Los Angeles to rekindle, and who knows, get some more television work. It seems to be a good time for actors to get work again.
Absolutely.
Knock on wood.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what were some things you were doing to keep busy now that Hollywood's starting to open back up? What were you doing to keep busy the last few years?
Well, when lockdown started, when the pandemic started, I was like, how do I stay relevant as an actor? It was pretty scary. And I got together with a bunch of guys that I went to Santa Monica High School with. Ron Campbell, back then he was Ron Rosen, who helped start the Actors Gang with Tim Robbins out of UCLA. And Matt Walker, who also went to Semel High, and Lee Ehrenberg from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies and countless other wonderful roles that he's brought to life, who I had done children's theater with back in 1973, whatever. Anyway, we were like, what can we do? And we all expressed our mutual love of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. So we adapted Waiting for Godot as if it were, more appropriate for the pandemic. So it was called Waiting for COVID. And I played Lucky. Matt and Ron had played Didi and Gogo on stage down in La Jolla. So Lee played Patso and I played Lucky. And I rewrote Lucky's speech. I don't, if you're not familiar with it, it's a long, thinking, rambling 13-page monologue. And I adapted it for the pandemic. And my computer wasn't so up to the current standards that the other fellows' computers were. So we had a few misfires, but we've eventually got it done, but we never released it. I'm considering actually just releasing my Lucky speech that I had written for the pandemic because it is pretty compelling and quite fun. That's one little project. I also got in touch. I had heard through a Facebook friend who had adapted Back to the Future as if Shakespeare had written it.
Oh, wow.
And well, he had announced on his page, I was following him, and he said, there's a company out of London who was sort of ready for the pandemic, and they were going to Zoom all of Shakespeare's plays, but they were going to also do these as if Shakespeare had written Mean Girls, Star Wars, and Back to the Future. And I was like, is that Back to the Future wasn't casting? And he said, yeah, have you give me the artistic director's name or the casting director's name. And I got in touch with them when they realized who I am. They were like, yes, we'd love for you to join us. What would you like to play? Who would you like to play? And I was like, how about Doc Brown? Wow. And they said, you got it. So I did a condensed version of Back to the Future as if Shakespeare had written it, called Get Thee Back, and did all of Doc Brown's role, the slide for life from the clock tower, the whole kit and caboodle from my living room with my wife helping me by being art director and costumer and my camera person. When I needed to, she tilted my computer on the floor so I could crawl on the floor to make it look like I was crawling up the building to the clock tower. So it came out pretty darn good. They were kind of new at producing Zoom productions, and they got better over the summer as they did Shakespeare's entire canon. So over that first summer of the pandemic, this company called The Show Must Go Online, TSMGO, like I said, did all these productions, and they had talent from around the world plug into this. I remember our fight choreographer was in South America. I also played Sir Toby Belch for them in Twelfth Night, and my Mariah was in the Caribbean. We had performers in Australia, and to make it so everyone could rehearse at the same time, and then of course perform live on the day of the performance was quite a challenge. And they pulled it off, and I recommend all of it is free, available on YouTube. Look them up. The Show Must Go Online, and I'm Doc Brown in Get Thee Back. Ian Drescher is the name of the author who adapted it. A very witty, fun, clever man who, for some reason, I'm not Facebook friends anymore with him. I haven't figured out how that happened. But nonetheless, it's one of the things I've done a lot of play readings and movie script readings. You would call it a table read, but when it's on Zoom, I think you call it Zoom readings. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I've tried to stay active. None of these projects that I've done during the pandemic have paid. So I've been kind of in a tailspin earning money. It's been very hard. I do a lot of live entertainment, immersive theater, independent film, living history, a lot of different things. I try to diversify as an actor. And of course, all that disappeared. So, and as well as fan cons. Comic cons are just starting to come back and such. And I think, over the course of the last 2.5 years, I must have lost $100,000 worth of work. And now I'm getting ready. I have to move because my landlady sold our place. So we're like, oh boy. So kind of up against it right now. Thank you for letting me vent.
No worries. No, and again, thank you for coming on the podcast as well too. And we were able to kind of hear all these, these stories, and the fact that we've been seeing more of Back to the Future because the fans want to see a part 4, but we're seeing other versions of adaptations, right? We're seeing plays, we're seeing books, we're seeing games. So it's great to see one of the castmates from the original trilogy was in this version of Back to the Future. Not to put you on the spot, is there any way we can get a line for as you as Doc Brown? I'd love to hear it, but
great shot. Let's see. Well, I of course based my performance on Chris Lloyd because he owned it so well. Yeah. I was like, Naughty! Oh, great Scott! It's very fun to imitate Chris Lloyd.
Awesome.
The original way Chris has explained, he had finished Taxi when Universal offered him the role of Doc Brown, and he actually threw the script in the wastebasket. He only wanted to do legitimate theater at the time, and he had planned to do a show with Colleen Dewhurst, I think on Broadway or off Broadway, and his wife at the time, I think, or girlfriend at the time, unbeknownst to him, had taken the script out of the garbage because Chris had said to her in the previously, no stone unturned. I want to look at all projects, etc. Well, waiting to do the production on stage with Colleen Dewhurst. Colleen got ill, and the show got postponed a month, then another month, and Chris finally said, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And she pulled the script out and said, "How about this?" and put it in front of him. And he was like, "Yes, let's take a look." Meanwhile, casting back at Universal was looking at John Lithgow, who I know because I was trying at that time to get John in another project that I was helping cast, and he wanted to take a year off to be with the kids. So that's why John, I think, passed on Doc Brown. And then they were looking at Jeff Goldblum and what's the little guy from Dudley Moore.
Oh, yeah.
They had a lot of, interesting choices that if you get Michael Klastron's wonderful Back to the Future Encyclopedia, the book that he put out a few years ago, it has actually the casting director's notes of who they were looking at for Doc Brown, waiting, of course, for Chris Lloyd to circle back and get it.
The rest was history.
So let's see. Did I answer your question? I think I did.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so you had already, been, obviously in the business for, well over a decade. I know also you had a small part in Johnny Dangerously. If I'm not mistaken, weren't you the gentleman that had the "I Love Johnny" T-shirt?
I was that gentleman.
Right?
I was selling the "I Heart Johnny" T-shirts. Total anachronism.
Yeah.
Amy Heckerling, when I auditioned for her, she wanted, "Give me a New York accent." I'd say, "I love Johnny. I love Johnny. I love Johnny. I love Johnny." And she was like, no, just work on it. I'll see you on set. I was like, oh, good. And I just loved being on that set because I already was a big fan of Beetlejuice. Michael Keaton was just real up there in my esteem. But I also was a fan of Mary Lou Henner and Joe Piscopo and oh my goodness, Maureen Stapleton. I remember I had just gotten out of makeup and costume, and Maureen Stapleton was walking past me, heading to those departments in her house robe, still with her newspaper under her arm, blinders on, just walking by. But seeing her, my jaw dropped and I just couldn't take my eyes off her. And I remember her saying to me, "It's not polite to look at an old woman first thing in the morning." It was like 7:30 in the morning. But just to be around the great Maureen Stapleton was really a thrill. And I remember, because I didn't have any scenes with Joe Piscopo, but I really loved what he was doing on Saturday Night Live, etc. I knocked on his dressing room door before I left, and he said, "Come in." Wow. So I went in and spent about an hour chatting with Joe Piscopo, who loved making movies. I don't know what happened to him. Yeah. But he was just a genuinely sweet man. I had a great time on set. Dom DeLuise and I became friends. I remember on that set, staying in touch with Dom, who ended up using my Laurel and Hardy team. I worked at Universal Studios starting in '87 till 2001 as Stan Laurel, and playing also Charlie Chaplin and Groucho Marx, among other characters. And Dom would specifically request my team, my Oliver Hardy partner, Beavis Faversham, who was the #1 Ollie there, and myself, to warm up his crowds for his new Candid Camera show. And then years later, I ran into Dom with Mel Brooks and Anne Bancroft, and Dom had to introduce me. "Mel, and this boy, you see him as Charlie Chaplin, Stan Laurel, Groucho Marx. You think they're there?" And he was really pumping me up, and it was really lovely. And I said, "Actually, Mr. Brooks, we've met a few times. When I was 14, I was brought to the set by an actor who I'd met, who brought me onto the set to meet Mel while he was shooting Young Frankenstein's Putting on the Ritz number." And actually that time, my friend Roy Wallach said, "Mel, you'll got to meet this kid. He's an actor." And Mel took one look and said, "I got no time for kids," and left. And then many years later, my Marx Brothers team auditioned for Mel for Robin Hood Men in Tights. And Mel immediately said, "I remember you guys. You were great. I wanted you for this banquet scene, but I had to cut them because the actor playing the Don Corleone type mob boss role wanted too much money." At which point I realized it was Dom. Yep. So I just turned to Dom and started choking him, it was very funny. And Anne, who was, God rest her, Dom's best friend, laughed at that. It was nice to make Anne Bancroft and Mel Brooks laugh.
Yeah. And I can't let you sneak away without asking, I mean, are there any Michael Keaton stories that you could share from on set?
Just that he has such great charisma and such a great professional demeanor. Really lovely to see him work and be close up. And at the wrap party, you know, at the time, I wasn't making a living as an actor. I was doing catering or parking cars, whatever I could do, PBX operating. And ironically, the catering company that I was working for catered the wrap party at 20th Century Fox for Johnny Dangerously. So during the party, I was serving Amy Heckerling and Michael Keaton their drinks. And I remember Michael leaning over to Amy saying, "Well, what wasn't he in the film?"
Oh,
and I was like,
wow.
"Yes, I got to work."
Wow.
But at that wrap party, they showed all the musical numbers that were cut. The film actually had several musical numbers in it, and it was really hilarious because you could see at the wrap party why they cut the numbers. Everyone was flat or not singing very well. You know, God bless them, but they couldn't sing. Although they kept Mary Lou Henner's number in, I believe. It's my Johnny Dangerously story.
And so this was a year before the first Back to the Future film. And obviously you joined in the second and the third film. Now this is, you know, dumb question. Prior to you joining the second film, were you a fan already of the first Back to the Future?
Yes, what had happened in '83, I did a film at the American Film Institute with Dan O'Herlihy starring, and I was a bit player, support player, but it was co-starring Dan O'Herlihy and Crispin Glover.
Oh.
And I thought Crispin was a fascinating actor as well as Dan. And I got Crispin's number to stay in touch. And in '84, I worked on a Western with Clint Eastwood called Pale Rider. And when it came out in '85, I wanted to see what else was coming out. And you know, Michael J. Fox and Chris Lloyd and Back to the Future, had to go see that since it was competition. And as soon as Crispin came on the screen, I was like, hey, I know that guy. And he was knocking it out of the park. It was fantastic the way he owned George McFly, and everyone owned their role so well. Leah and Chris and Mike were just brilliant. All the support players, Tom Wilson as well, it just really did outstanding work. James, oh my goodness, everyone across the board, I thought were great. I even called Crispin to congratulate him. And so I was a fan, to answer your question.
Yeah. And I mean, what was that time? I know this is a while ago, but what was that time like, right? I mean, '84, '85 are some of my favorite years, and '84 was a wild year too. You know, Beverly Hills Cop, the first Nightmare on Elm Street film came out, and in '85 as well too. I mean, there's just a ton of classic films. I mean, what was that like for Hollywood?
Well, I had an interest in keeping up with some of the titles you mentioned. Example, Beverly Hills Cop. I was interested in because the director, Martin Brest, had discovered me. I was going to the American Conservatory Theater and doing my intermediate studies towards my MFA at San Francisco State University, and I saw an ad in the foyer of the theater department looking for a young 18-year-old actor to be considered for a major motion picture. And I had a friend who I thought would fit the bill since he was 18 and I was already 20. And I, at the last minute, got sort of pulled into going to this cattle call, this audition with my friend, because he wouldn't go unless I went with him. And there were about 500 actors filling out the forms and being seen 6 at a time by the casting director and the director. And my friend and I got pulled back after our 6 to read with an actress for the director. My friend got excused. I was asked to read a second time, and then I got excused. And then when I got to my car, the actress came running saying, Jeffrey, he wants to see you again. So I went back, and the director, who was Martin Brest, said, listen, I really like the way you read the first scene, the second scene, not so much. And I said, well, I didn't expect to be here. I came because my friend Lincoln, I thought, would be good. And his father helped start the committee and was a director in Hollywood, and his dad said, "Yeah, you can act, Lincoln." And I was like, "Prove your dad wrong." Anyway, so they liked me. He said, "You know, I'm not sure what to do with you because I like your energy on the first reading. The second, not so much." And I said, "I didn't expect to be here. I'm a little hungover. My girlfriend at the time had just graduated from UC Santa Cruz, and I was at her graduation party the night before. I didn't go home. I just borrowed my friend's razor to shave. It didn't do very well." And he said, okay, let's read the first scene again. And I did. And then he turned to Wallace Nocita and said, "I want to test him. I want to give him a screen test." I was like, okay. And they had open calls for this film. It was originally called The Genius, in Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. And as far as I know, I was the only actor to get a screen test for this role. I tested with Ali Sheedy, and on the same day, Eric Stoltz, Dana Carvey, Brian Backer, John from Christine, John Crawford, not Crawford.
Cusack?
Anyway, sorry?
John Cusack?
No, not John Cusack. From the movie Christine, the Stephen King, John Stockwell. Is that it?
Stockwell. Yeah.
Anyway, we all screen tested with Ali Sheedy that day. And the film actually, this took about a year and a half to actually transpire because the film went into turnaround, meaning it lost its backing. It originally was just at MGM. And they were trying to get John Lennon to be in it, and then he got assassinated, and then they had Warren Oates. Warren Oates died. So the MGM and United Artists merged, and they couldn't decide whether or not they were going to do the film. To make a long story short, the film went forward finally. So the screen test got back on track. And I remember during my screen test, Ali Sheedy kind of looking through me. I was like, why is she looking through me? And I noticed in the back corner of the soundstage, Eric Stoltz was kind of hanging out during my test. I was like, why is she looking at Eric? Years later, I asked Eric, "Were you and Ali an item back then in '82?" And he said, "What was that, '82? Yeah, we were living together." I was like, Ali wanted her beau. Anyway, none of us got the role. It, of course, went to Matthew Broderick. They renamed the film War Games.
Yeah.
And but because of that, Martin had told an agent who had come out of the New York William Morris office and opened her own boutique agency in Beverly Hills about me. And she kind of pursued me. She was visiting her producer friend who was shooting The Right Stuff up in Northern California. And she came to visit me in San Francisco, kind of wooed me and negotiated my contract. An actor has to negotiate their contract before they screen test. So they don't have the studio over a barrel, I guess. Nonetheless, I had to move back to Los Angeles because I had this good agent. And eventually, because I was a hot item, I got into a lot of big offices, got known by a lot of casting very quickly. And within about 3 months, I started working. I got more of a support featured role, co-starring in George Miller's episode of the remake of Nightmare at 20,000 Feet in Twilight Zone, the movie. 3 months after the terrible tragic accident that killed the kids and Vic Morrow. In my book, I was shocked and embarrassed that Spielberg decided to continue to finish the film because I thought, what horrible taste. It's, respect the dead. But he had enough of that episode, John Landis's episode, in the can, where the accident apparently happened on the last day of shooting, to make it work, to finish it. And he had Joe Dante and George Miller and his own episode all already cast and set to go. So they decided to finish the film. And I auditioned for George Miller, who directed the Mad Max movies. I was a big fan already. And he and I got along really well. And just a charming, wonderful, humble, modest gentleman, and very exciting to work with because we collaborated. He told the entire cast, if it feels like there's some activity, a line that you'd like to do in the rehearsal, try it.
Yeah.
And I was able to come up with 3 bits and a few lines. And it was really exciting to work for the first time for me with Garrett Brown, who invented the Steadicam, who was running up and down the aisles. And then I got along nicely with Alan Davio, who unfortunately died during the pandemic, got COVID while at the motion picture home. the cinematographer who shot E.T., who shot my episode of Twilight Zone movie. And it was just a delightful ensemble to be a part of. Donna Dixon and Abby Lane and J.D. Johnston and John Lithgow, of course. Watching John work up close was just a dream. I teach actors, and I'm able to explain how different lead actors have extremely different methods to their acting. And watching Michael J. Fox up close and Clint Eastwood up close and Michael Keaton and John Lithgow, it's really a lovely gift to be able to express a bit of each one of their techniques and push actors into putting their foot in the water with different techniques to see what works for them. So I've been very fortunate in that I've been able to rub elbows with these great talents. And so shortly after Twilight Zone movie, I worked on Louis Malle's, the wonderful director Louis Malle did a remake of an Italian film called Crackers with Donald Sutherland and Sean Penn. And because I went to high school with Sean and his brothers, Michael, his older brother, was in my class. I got along with Sean and my scene basically got cut, unfortunately, from that film, but it was really great to be on that set and to meet Donald Sutherland, who I mentioned, the fellow Lincoln, whose father, Alan, who started the committee, had directed Donald in Steelyard Blues and was a director who was very good friends with Donald. And I used his name to break the ice with Donald Sutherland. So he warmed up to me very quickly and got to, rub elbows with Wallace Shawn and Jack Warden. It was really cool, really lovely. And then shortly thereafter, Johnny Dangerously. I think I got that Scarecrow and Mrs. King guest star spot in there somewhere. And of course, worked the bit part on Dallas and the Max Headroom, working with Jeffrey Tambor, who I had recommended for another film that I helped cast, the one that I tried to get John Lithgow on. And Jeffrey got cast in that. And that was the film Weber's 15 that MTV kind of produced and buried and created the reality series, whatever they called it, The Real World.
Oh, wow.
I wish that hadn't happened.
That was based
anyway, yeah, so I'm connecting the dots here. In 84, Chris Penn met Clint Eastwood at a party and said, I want to work with you. You got a Western or something? Clint had been sort of wooed by these writers that had a Western they wanted him to do. And he didn't really want to return to Westerns. He kept putting it off. And Warner Brothers finally threw enough money and offered him the directorship and a new bus to do the film. And when Chris got the script, he threw it back at Clint and said, I don't want to play a good guy. It was the role of Eddie Conway. He threw it back and said, I want to play a bad guy. So they put Chris in the role of LaHood's son, the bad guy who in the film molests Sidney Penny's character and gets shot in the arm. And anyway, Chris moved out of that role. The actor playing Teddy Conway got moved into the Eddie Conway role and left open the Teddy role without my agent, that wonderful agent I mentioned, had called Warner Brothers and said, do you have anything that you're casting that hasn't come out in the breakdowns, how agents find out about things? They said, yeah, there's this bit and nice part in Clint's new Western, but we'll cast it from our files, we think. She asked them to describe it. She said, I think I've got a client who would be good for that. And they sent me in. And I knew I had to cry on cue. Was put on tape by the late Fritz Manns, the producer of the film. And I kind of didn't want to leave anything to chance. I had a lock of my grandmother's hair in my pocket, who was the only one in my family as a kid who encouraged me to pursue my acting. I wanted to be an actor since I was very little. My parents did not want me to. But she encouraged me. So I had a lock of her hair in case I really needed to be sentimental and try to make the tears come. I had some techniques, some sense memory, emotional recall. I had my Meisner fantasy charging. I had all these different things, not wanting to leave anything to chance. And really just doing the lines in the script and doing the actions, the tears came. And I guess Clint saw that. And Friday I was on a plane to Ketchum, Sun Valley, Idaho. and for the next 4 or 5 weeks on location shooting that film.
And Clinton's fairly tall, right? He's like 6'4", 6'5".
Well, he isn't that much taller than me. I think I'm probably 3 inches shorter than him or so. But he seems taller, especially when he's dressed in his duster and cowboy hat.
Yeah.
And even though he was directing, he had to be in that costume too, because so he could step in to do his scenes. And I remember we were getting ready. We were dressing, the crew was dressing my first shot in the film, where I come up to Michael Moriarty's character, Hol Barrett, and say that line that my brother had just said down the road: "Aren't you going to town, Mr. Barrett? Ain't that kind of dumb after what happened last time?" And it's a comedy bit. It's a really well-written little reincorporation in comedy. And while the crew was setting that up, Clint went down the path to set up the next shot with Carrie Snodgrass and Michael Moriarty. And I followed him because I had not met Clint yet. So I followed him up the road towards the woods, and he turned to me and said, "Yeah." And he's in his duster and his hat, and I'm kind of intimidated. And I said, "Mr. Eastwood, I'm Jeffrey Weissman. I just want to introduce myself. I'm in the next scene." And he goes, "I know who you are. Who do you think cast you?" I was like, "Oh yeah, of course." But he has this persona, this iconic thing that is intimidating.
Yeah.
And luckily, it kind of broke the ice, and we had lunch several times. I remember, in fact, I had brought my ex-wife in to visit the set while we were shooting, and Clint, the day before, had fired the caterer, and the new caterer had to be ready to go and serve on the top of this mountain where he had built this set that was completely vulnerable to the elements, and a blizzard was moving in. So it was just Clint, my ex-wife, and I having steak and lobster out on location on the top of this mountain in a snowstorm. And I was like, "Nice weather, Clint." And he said, "I hadn't expected to be snowing in October." He rolled with the punches. And what I love so much about him, Zemeckis, many of the directors that I've worked with, their crew think ahead of them. There are 1 or 2 shots at least ahead in their preparations and are working like clockwork. They like having their paycheck and are probably paying their mortgage or whatever. And so they jump to no matter what the conditions. And on Pale Rider, with the wind chill factor, it was most of the time minus 10 degrees. It was a very cold shoot. And if you look at the scene where Daddy Spider gets shot from head to toe, it took us 3 days to shoot that. And on one day where he's in sunshine, pardon me, the siren's going by. One day we're in a blizzard, and one day we were back in overcast and sunshine, and all the snow had been melted. So we had to bring in the oil-based fake snow. And I remember if you look at it closely, Spider, when he's calling out the bad guys, he's in the sunshine with maybe a little flurry of snow. And then when they start the shooting and it cuts to Brother and I at the Mercantile, we're in a blizzard. And then it cuts back to him being shot from head to toe. And then when we get from the Mercantile to his dead body, that's the 3rd day, and all the snow had melted. So we were on the oil-based snow, and Chuck, the actor playing Eddie, hit my mark, went to my mark. And so I had to go to his mark, and this is just on a rehearsal. And I slipped on the oil-based snow and almost kicked poor Doug, playing my dad, in the head. I remember even seeing his hair fly from my boot. I was like, "Ah!" Anyway, we kept it going. It was a rehearsal, and Clint has this thing that I think he learned from Don Siegel, who directed the Dirty Harry movies. He probably got it from John Ford, the old Western director, to shoot the rehearsals. And when I heard Clint say, "Cut, let's move on," that means he liked what we got in the rehearsal, and he wasn't going to do a take. So for the first time ever on this show, I got into Clint's face and I said, "Clint, Chuck didn't hit his mark. I took Chuck's place. I almost kicked Doug in the head. It was a mess." And he said, no, it looked good. We're just going to cut from your face." At which point I went, "Oh, I got the close up. I'm not going to argue with that." We moved on.
Very good. That's awesome. That was just fate just working in your favor.
It was nice, and it's a pretty good close up. I knew I had tears in my eyes, but with the wind chill, I think they froze. I
Another
don't know.
another director that that I know that shot a lot of the rehearsals was John G. Avildsen, who did Rocky and Karate Kid. I know in Karate Kid,
Yeah,
on YouTube, you could see almost the whole movie's rehearsal.
yeah. The theory behind it is, and Clint rarely, if ever, would call action. He would always say, "Whenever you're ready," which was really lovely because back then it was also film, which is expensive, not like digital now. But I think these directors realize that when actors hear action, they tense up and get self-conscious. Whereas in a rehearsal, they're much more relaxed, and it's more. If you want naturalism in the performance, shoot that rehearsal.
Interesting. That's a good point.
It saves time and helps with your budget.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the studio loved him.
Yeah. So I mean, and maybe it's Clint Eastwood, but has there ever been a director or an actor where you just had that aha moment where it was maybe you were just a little bit too nervous to work with, or kind of like the butterflies came in, or in your business, it's being a professional and you can kind of just adapt to the environment.
Did I ever have an actor where I was too intimidated to work? Wow. I can't really say. I was in Rodney Dangerfield's last film with Frank Gorshin. It was Frank Gorshin's one of his last films too, and it's really just a so-so kind of movie. But it was interesting to see kind of the power ego trip that Rodney was. He may have been ailing. It was very hard for me to watch him do his lines, and he was reading from cue cards, and it was obvious he was reading, and he was playing God at the Gates of Heaven, and I was playing Groucho with the Marx Brothers at the Gates of Heaven as his angels. And for me, that was I don't want to say intimidating. It was upsetting, and there was nothing I could do about it. So I felt helpless. I think that's what you were asking. If I've ever felt helpless on a set. So that was one. I can't say that, whenever I've worked on a project, I go at it with a lot of respect and ready to work and work hard. And when you work on a film or a TV show, you hope that you get a relationship that's like friendly or family.
Yeah.
And often you'll hear casts refer to the shows they work on as, oh, that was the best family, because you grow together, especially if you're on location for a month or two or a year. You really get to know these relationships. I remember though, when I worked Scarecrow and Mrs. King, the first couple of days, Kate Jackson was very aloof, and I was very worried because I had scenes with her, and I had this real innocent character I was playing, who was a wannabe filmmaker and a go-getter and full of gumption and all this, and I was intimidated because Kate, I'm a real people person, and Kate completely was not available to me the first couple of days on the set. By the third day, I think she realized I was a guest star, and she bought me a glass of wine at lunch, and broke the ice. Bruce Boxleitner and I, and she had lunch together. And I know she saw how hard I was working with. There was a scene where my character, Scotty, was kidnapped by these bad guys, extortionists, because I had them on my amateur camera, and I was stuffed into the trunk of a car when I was kidnapped. And because of trains, planes, and automobiles or technical errors, we had to do that 15 times. Wow. And I have claustrophobia. Anyway, but by the third day, and I think one of the reasons that I had asked one of the other guest stars who was playing one of the bad guys, why she seemed so cold, he said, "Oh, did you see the rags? The Examiner, which is like TMZ in print, came out with some horrible gossip about her. And I think that's why she was clammed up or what have you. And like I said, she warmed up. So, and I don't really think I've had terrible experience. I had some mistreatment. I wanted to get on a big set just to be back on a big set. And I offered my services to be a sort of background dancer in the La Vie Boheme scene in Rent, Chris Columbus film. And I had an AD just treat me and the rest of the background like cattle. It was horrible. And I tried to stand up to her and write letters. This is unacceptable to be treated with no respect at all. It was awful. I remember lunch with some dancers that I knew on the set and the choreographer, and she came over and tried to rip me a new ass. What are you doing over here? You're not allowed over here. I said I was invited by my friends, and that shut her up. But at the same time, it really why people get into the power or have short tempers. That any number of reasons, the conditions of no sleep, of overwork. I'm a Libra, so I try to balance these things out. Like with the Back to the Future debacle over Crispin Glover. I've been on all sides of that thing because I was originally friends with Crispin, and I wasn't told up front really that I would be taking over the role. I was actually contacted first to be a photo double stand-in for him, thinking in my mind that they needed George at multiple places at the same time, the way they needed Michael to play multiple characters. And I started going for makeup fittings and a body cast fitting for the special effect of spinning. And I even called Crispin and left him a message. I'm up for being your photo double. Will you say a good word for me? And he didn't call me back until after part 3 came out, and he needed to sue because they used footage of him without negotiating. They were going to pay him scale or something. And also because my makeups were based on his life mask. And he never gave them permission for that, which surprised me because Universal had me play Stan Laurel and Charlie Chaplin and Groucho Marx, and they always paid the licensing for me to be those characters. But I think they were in such a corner. The producers Spielberg and Marshall and Kennedy and Canton and Gale, they were in a quandary, and Bob Zemeckis were in a quandary because Crispin was asking for $1 million and script approval, and they weren't going to give him that. I, at the time, kind of, when I heard this much later down the road, I thought, well, why not? Because his star was rising. His work in River's Edge and other projects was pretty remarkable. And his first George McFly in the first film was fantastic. Yeah. But they didn't see it that way. And I think the hook for them was the script approval.
Yeah.
I don't think they were going to give him script approval. And very rarely, you have to be a pretty mega star to get that. But they also, at the same time, they were not upfront with me and telling me it was my makeup artist. Ken Chase, when I was going for a screen test to see if the makeup was working with Dean Cundy and Bob Z, I remember Robert Zemeckis asking Dean Cundy, what do you think? And Dean saying, I think we got Crispin without the trouble. I was like, what does that mean? And then Ken Chase told me, Crispin's out. I think you're going to be George McFly. I was like, how are they going to do that? And of course, they did with the old footage spliced with my work and keeping me in the background because the full front didn't quite look like Crispin, but the profile of that makeup looked dead on Crispin. And then the old George, I later learned while on set that being hung upside down was meant as torture for Crispin. He apparently was a pain in the ass during the first film shooting. He had freaked out when Ken Chase trimmed his hair in his makeup chair. He brought a painting that he and Leah had done in rehearsal, insisting that Bob Z put it on the McFly home wall. And Bob Z, I got art directors who are in charge of this. I can't undermine their work, and it's too late for all this stuff that you're trying to do. I get that Crispin is an artist and wanted to be a collaborator, but I don't think he was willing to pay or play the power plays that Hollywood had in place. Yeah. Now he's got a great deal of star power and can get away with that stuff. Whereas back then, he was really pushing his luck. And I've taken a lot of flack from Crispin Glover fans, and I'm a fan, and who think I'm, evil or a scam. And then I've also at the same time been embraced by a lot of fans internationally who think, I was part of the glue that held it together by keeping it seemingly that he was in those films, in the sequels. I don't know if you know that Seamus in part 3 was supposed to be played by Crispin.
Yeah.
But they threw it to Michael.
Yeah.
And instead of giving it to me, who's my face you don't know me from Adam from any of the other films with my face. So there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts that were going on. I just got my Paradox script out of my filing cabinet the other day, and I was looking at those McFly 2015 kitchen scenes. And when there's a rewrite, you get a different page, a different color. And there's about 8 colors in the McFly 2015 kitchen. In one version, they have Marty in the ortholev hanging upside down. In some versions, they don't have George at all. It's really interesting because they didn't know if they had Crispin or not, or if they were even going to have George be in, and they needed it for the flashback for George to be murdered in the alternate 85, of course. Yeah. Anyway, production was stuck between a rock and the hard place, and Crispin was duly upset. And it's unfortunate because my friendship with Crispin I saw that he was not treated fairly, I thought, and I helped him when he sued, and then he and his attorney let that out to Variety and Hollywood Reporter, and that in turn was used against me at Universal to become persona non grata at other castings, which I found out firsthand from, in fact, the casting director of Murder, She Wrote. I was like, what? They specifically asked for a Laurel and Hardy, but not me. And I was like, oh shit, I've been blacklisted. And so my kind of
signed for both films. I know they were shot back to back. Were you signed for both, or? I
was told by Bob Gale while shooting part 2 that for wearing all the makeups and being hung upside down and everything, that he would find a role for me in part 3 without the makeup, which I loved that idea. I even made suggestions asking about the Western Union delivery man that Joe Flaherty played. Thought maybe a cowboy or something, but that never panned out. And then I only did one quick day.
Yeah.
Oh no, actually it was a long day on part 3 when Marty returns as Clint Eastwood from the Old West, and George can't find his glasses. You see me briefly on the McFly patio at the house. So I kept working in Hollywood after Back to the Future on other small projects. Saved by the Bell, I was Screech's guru.
Yeah.
The high geek.
I remember that.
And I was the sensitive asshole in the Assaholics Anonymous of the Man Show. And I did a Diagnosis Murder guest spot with Dick Van Dyke. And because Dick was very close friends with Stan Laurel, and I knew Stanley's daughter, Lois, and her late husband at that time, Tony Hawes, we had a lot to talk about. And in between setups and shoots, shooting scenes on that set, Dick and I were just engaged with each other with stories, and it was really, really rewarding. I loved it.
Amazing. And I mean, this is a question that comes up all the time, and we've already gotten the answer from the creators, but do you think in this day and age we could get a Back to the Future 4?
Well, I think the musical is kind of part 4.
Yeah.
It rehashes, the story we all know, but there's other elements in it that will be surprising to the fan. And every fan, and I know literally hundreds of fans who have gone to London and Manchester to see the musical, and they love it. Then they would go back and see it, and some have gone 3 or 4 times already. And it just, day before yesterday, won a big award as Best New Musical over in Great Britain. And I'm sure it'll come to Broadway, and the States will get to see it. And they got a crack cast performing, and of course they had extra time in rehearsal because the production got shut down by COVID.
Yeah.
And the special effects will blow your mind. So it's the musical is part 4. Look at it that way. There was a gentleman who started the Back to the Future fan club. The Hill Valley newsletter came with it back in the early 90s. And in a couple of those newsletters, fans wrote their synopses. Is that the right word? Synopsises of Back to the Future Part 4, of what the possibilities could be. And there were some great ones. The fans wrote some fantastic versions of what might happen. And then the cartoon came out.
Yeah.
And then the video game, and all these offshoots, Rick and Morty. Anyway, but the Bob Z and Bob Gale have said time and again, as long as they're alive, there will be no Back to the Future Part 4. Though I had a kind of a argument with Tim Russ from Star Trek fame, when this very topic came up at a Comic-Con. He said, Universal owns it. If they decide there's enough money in it, they'll remake it. I said, yeah, but a Part 4, and that too. Tim would not waver from his thinking, and I was like, okay. But the Bob said,
because Tom Holland from Spider-Man, he said he'd love a chance to, and again, I thought I read this, and if not, I thought I saw it on a clip that he would love the chance to, I don't know if it was just play Marty or be in a remake of Back to the Future. That would be amazing.
As did Daniel Radcliffe did too. The talent is there that would love to do it. Whether or not the Bobs first would have to be bought out or silenced or dead before I think they would allow it. That's what they've said. Yeah. Not in our lifetimes, as the quote that they said.
It's amazing with the technology they had in the 80s to make that film, those films. Like, what could they do with today's technology, right? And what's crazy is a lot of the predictions that they had in Part 2 actually ended up coming true. Most of them ended up coming true in reality. So there could be some some jokes on that and what they could do with today's technology. The fan in me is still rooting that maybe we could get a sequel. I'd rather get a sequel than a remake. I don't want to see it redone.
Yeah, it would be great to see the adventures of Jules and Vern and have cameos from the original talent.
Yeah,
jump up. That would be very cool. I got to visit I remember my nephew was visiting from Oklahoma, who was about 9 or 10 years old at the time. I wanted to watch some of the hoverboard scene in the Hill Valley 2015 square, and brought my nephew Sam, and I remember introducing him to Mike, and Mike said, "Hey, my wife just had a baby boy and we named him Sam. Nice to meet you, Sam." And I realized Mike's wife, Tracy, and Tom Wilson's wife, and my ex-wife all gave birth to baby boys within 2 weeks of each other while we were shooting, as if we were up against it enough. We had to have babies born at the same while shooting. And so that set, that Hill Valley 2015 set, was amazing. It was art directed within an inch of its life. The interiors, Cafe 80s, and various places that they knew they were going to go in with the camera. The camera doesn't do it justice. The art direction is phenomenal. The Texaco station, the Jaws 3D, it wasn't 3D, the holographic.
Yeah. And there was more to your scenes, right? I know, your character came in upside down. There's an injury, but I saw some deleted scenes that didn't make the final cut. There was more to why your character was hurt.
Yes. Yeah, the pizza scene and Dad's home scene have some bits, a bit more of my work. Pizza, the body cast that I was fitted for worked in that scene, in that I was in the body cast, the costume was put on over it. Out of the back of the body cast came a pipe that went through the set with a wheel on it. And when on cue, Lorraine would get the hydrated pizza and say, George, rotate your axis for dinner. And I go, okay, four, and spin, doing my best tribute to Crispin's laugh. And I would spin for pizza. But the way she set it on the floor and how I was spinning to eat maybe at the table, it just didn't jive. And I understand why they didn't keep that in. Another was the fruit, please. I think Lorraine asks Marlene to give your grandfather a piece of fruit, and she gives me a banana. I tried to eat a banana upside down and created a comedy bit with the peel slapping me in the face. And that was cut, and that footage doesn't exist. I do have a still from it. But I tried grabbing some of the lines that were originally meant for Crispin back, in that when I arrived on set, the family of Back to the Future talent knew each other, and Zemeckis knew Elizabeth Shue from Adventures in Babysitting, of course. And when they started rehearsing, George's lines were given to Lorraine and Marty. And I was like, hey, I could do some of these. I try me. I'm an actor. I've studied. And they did, slowly give a few things back. Well, you're right. The stuff there's a lot more expose about Marty having the terrible accident with that Rolls Royce, or the train hitting, or whatever. Gosh, I have to get my script back out, but it's all in there. And a lot of those lines were divvied up, and I kind of fought to get a few of them back, which I did. But it was really a thrill to be on the set. I can't complain, because here I was, I've had a few nice co-starring roles, but here I was in the first sequel to the highest grossing film of 1985.
Yeah.
I had been in the highest grossing Western of 1985, Pale Rider, and of the 80s too, I believe. And I, had to pinch myself. I was very, very fortunate to be on that set.
Yeah.
The conditions why I was there were not the best. In fact, I had, my agent did not negotiate my billing. I had to go to Robert Zemeckis and say, look, I had a shared title card on Pale Rider. If I have anything less than that, my agent, your contract says an end title credit. And I thought that would be a step backwards in my career. And so he thought about that and said, yeah, that's fine. I'll give you that. And he mentioned it to Bob Gale and Neil Canton, who came over and yelled at me, you don't ever talk to the director about your billing. I was like, listen, he understands it would be a step backwards in my career. And they were pissed because they were trying to keep me a secret. They were trying to, not bring attention. After the film came out, I didn't get any photos I requested. Mysteriously, promotional events, tours that I was going to be on for Universal disappeared, had the plug pulled. It was kind of shitty.
But now, what are we, 35, 40 years, later, you're still part of the fandom, and you're,
it wasn't until late in the 90s that fans, well, there were a few fans that sought me out, found me for interviews and such. But then in the early 2000s, the DeLorean owners discovered me.
Wow.
And I started going to DeLorean owner conventions as a celebrity, and then I started emceeing for them or playing characters at their events and entertaining, even running improvisational comedy workshops for their members, which was a blast. And then the first Back to the Future cast reunion was at the Hollywood Show in 2008, and Chris and Leah and about 25 of the cast and crew appeared at that event. And the fans came out in droves and loved it. And every few years I'd be asked to do another show, which has been really wonderful, because I find the fan base around the world really like me. I was like, oh my God. So for that, I'm greatly appreciative and indebted. It's been really wonderful, and it's also helped me kind of heal. I've come out on many a podcast to explain my side because I was, silenced by the studio, and Crispin fans were totally against me, and so now, at least my story can get out there, and I also do a lot of charity work for various different, from Make-A-Wish and the Heart Association to Mother's Touch and the Jeffrey Foundation. And then, of course, for the Team Fox, I produced a Back to the Future cruise in the anniversary year of 2015, where we had a cruise with 6 or 7 of the cast and crew on it, and did our own Enchantment Under the Sea dance, and had a really great 7-8 day cruise for about 50 Back to the Future fans who will never forget it. It was a really terrific time, and we raised some nice dosh for the cause, because everyone, bottom line, loves Michael and wants to help him find a cure. Now that he's close to $1 billion in raising funds towards the research, it really is a movement, and it would be lovely to see Bob Gale and Crispin Glover come out, shake hands, and me join them all for something for Michael's charity.
That would be amazing. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I've been advocating for it for years, but they still are like oil and water. I don't think it'll ever happen, unfortunately. I would like to think it would.
Yeah, and also too, Jeffrey, you're accessible to fans, right? If I'm not mistaken, you're also on Cameo, so if they want to hear some of those classic lines, they can request you. They can reach out to you.
Hey, you, get your damn hand. Oh, Biff. A lot of people think that was Crispin. I actually got to redo those lines in the fight with Biff, and the kiss at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, and because we had to get those things from different angles, and I didn't have a lot as old George, but who's going to eat all that? Oh, I will. That's not much. Oh, how's Granddad's Little Pumpkin came up in rehearsal, because when they dressed Michael as Marlene, they put her in these orange hot pants and kind of stuffed them a little bit. And I, of course, was butt level with her hot pants, and I thought it looked like a pumpkin.
Wow.
So I, in rehearsal said, how's Granddad's Little Pumpkin? And Zemeckis liked it and they kept it in.
Yeah, I don't think fans realize how difficult of a job you had, because this was out of the ordinary, right? You're having to wear makeup, you're having to glue kind of this film together and stitch
4 hours a day. 4 hours a day it took to get into the makeup.
Wow.
I think we got it down. We had a crack makeup team. Mike Mills was my main man, who was the foreman on Beetlejuice, with Nancy Vasta, Kenny Mayers, wonderful makeup artist, and then Marvin Westmore of the famous Westmore family, Sonny Berman of the Berman Brothers, and then Zoltan and his wife would come in and help. We had this magnificent creme de la creme of the makeup artists of Hollywood royalty, really, and all the designs by Ken Chase, who kind of butted heads with Bob Z and was fired on the first day of shooting. Nonetheless, it took 4 hours, sometimes as little as 3.5 hours, to get into makeup. If I needed to be on set ready to go by 8:39 in the morning, I had to be in the makeup chair by 4:30. Maybe after a couple hours, I'd get a quick breakfast break for half an hour, and then back on to be colored. And well, you want to see the footage? I have the documentary footage that was cut from the making of Back to the Future 2, because once again, they wanted to keep me secret. I can't keep a secret. Just a moment, I'll share the screen here. There you have Nancy Vasta in the foreground, Sonny Berman. In the chair next to me is Leah, being worked on by Kenny Mayers, and maybe Marvin Westmore.
Wow.
Oh no, it's Mike Mills.
This is the process.
Yeah, so I had about 9 different pieces to be glued on the skull cap. After a couple hours, like I mentioned, I would get to go have a breakfast burrito or whatever, and then come back and be colored, and then applied Hazel's wig. They didn't like us eating in the makeups because it's like a mask and it's latex, and if you eat, you can crack the edges around your mouth, and if at all possible, eat through a straw, they would say.
Well, wow, this is amazing. And this process takes 4 hours?
Yes, and another hour at the end of the day to remove. On the last day of shooting, I saved my makeup and kept it on a head, and it lives in a Back to the Future museum in Rome. Oh, no, not in Rome, in Italy. And here we are at the Enchantment Under the Sea Deck.
Wow, this is it. So this kiss is going to be with the makeup.
What a trooper Leah is.
Legendary scene.
Okay, so this is just a montage chronologically. This is me in junior high playing Charles Condamine in Blythe Spirit. This is from when I was up for playing David in War Games outside of here with Martin Brest. With my big hair in 1982. This is on Twilight Zone movie. You see me with a carnation in my lapel as the newlywed next to Donna Dixon there. Here with John Lithgow and Charles Knapp. On the set of Twilight Zone, I actually got cat scratch fever from a kitten while we were shooting, and so it was really weird the last few days of shooting. I was kind of sick all the time. Really love working with Donna. She and Dan, of course, got together and are still married. I Love Johnny. That was the I Love Johnny t-shirt there. These are shots from Pale Rider.
Yep. Wow.
There's Teddy. And I'm sorry, we're blocking Clint here, but this is in that blizzard matched with the sunshine shots that you can look for. Here is with the late, great Dustin Diamond as Screech's Guru, the High Geek, and then still with Mike Mills fixing me after lunch. The rest of these are probably McFly.
Wow.
Sometimes I'd hang upside down. I remember one week, besides the regular 12-hour days, I had a 19, a 21, and a 26-hour long day where I was hanging upside down. They built this contraption because it took a lot of time to get me down and put me back up. So they'd say, do a sit-up, and I do a sit-up. They put that under me so they didn't have to get me down all the time. Visiting with Elizabeth in my dressing room and with Bob Z. Right side up, rare shots. Here's that body cast I told you about, and that's that VistaVision camera that splices the film inside it so Michael could play the multiple roles or Tom could play the multiple roles. Now, we've had fans do art and send it to me, and that's what that was. I have a lot of art that fans want to give me, and I'm just so honored. You can see Mike's photo double and stunt double and stand-in that shot. There's the pizza being served on the ground, and then I rotated. And there's the banana shot that was cut, fruit please. There I'm actually getting down to like 4 a.m. there, taking a rest. And a close-up of it, you can see the right on of the makeup doesn't look so much like Crispin, but in this shot, this being in the background, it looks enough like him to fool the audience, and that's what they were after.
Wow.
And I'm glad he got his $750,000. I'm sure his lawyer took most of it, but and that's actually not Michael J. Fox there. That's Kevin Holloway, his photo double.
Oh, wow.
And this is from part 3. God rest one wonderful Wendy Jo Sperber.
Yeah.
And then we started doing, appearances at theaters for screenings of the trilogy. This is at a DeLorean car show with Claudia Wells, Chris Lloyd, Bob Gell. And there I am in my monster truck DeLorean. I wish. This was from the first cast reunion, the Hollywood show in 2008, that Michael came unannounced to.
Wow.
He was on a book tour. And then other characters I do, like Lobster Man. I think the rest is mostly, here I am with Dick Van Dyke from Murder She Diagnosis Murder. And us both doing our Stan Laurel impressions. And me as Stanley Laurel. And I think I have a shot here with Spielberg even. Yeah.
Wow. Is this 87, 86? That Spielberg picture?
These are all different years. This is the most recent. And that's me as Chaplin. Once again, I was at Universal from 87 to 2001. This is more recent as Charlie. Then I've been playing Larry Fine with the Three Stooges team, mostly at charities and parties, sometimes fundraisers. For Iggy Pop, since his band was called the Stooges, we brought him his 60th birthday cake, hired by his girlfriend, as Groucho Marx. And this is from a film I did called Corked, which is now a cult favorite. Here playing Mark Twain in a PBS movie called Mark Twain, Dreamland, Mark Twain in Jerusalem. More recent shots as Twain, doing living history.
Wow. And
then as a commedia dell'arte, Puccinella Citrullo, and as a fool for Renaissance fairs and different events. And when my boys were little, they're in their 30s now. So I do a lot of different characters. This is a short that's available on YouTube called Nobody's Laughing. Here where I played Igor in Young Frankenstein the musical on stage, and as the hobo on the Polar Express for the California Railroad Museum, another film called Savior of None. I did the Railroad Museum Polar Express for 11 years, and this is a short called The Traveler, which was really fun. And from various fundraisers, this is the first We're Going Back event in Los Angeles, where the fans from around the world got to go where we shot the movies. And we did our own Enchantment Under the Sea dance there, where you could meet the cast and crew and such.
Amazing. That was awesome. Yeah, amazing. And again, I know we saw some photos with you and Christopher Lloyd. Has he ever hinted towards you like he wants to make a part 4? I know there's been some excitement on his side, but have you guys ever secretly talked about wanting to make a part 4?
Well, Chris has revived Doc Brown numerous times for commercials and corporate events. I don't know, Chris loves to work.
Yeah.
And I think if the Bob said, yes, Chris, we're going to do a part 4 finally, or, he would probably jump because he loves to work. And that character has been very kind to him. I remember Chris and I have done numerous shows together, and he's that photo there with Claudia and Chris and I in front of the New Beverly Cinema. That was the first time I was really ever alone with Chris for any amount of time. I told Mike Mills, my makeup artist, I really love Chris's work. I adore his work. I'd love to meet him. He said, well, come out next week. We're going to be doing Hill Valley Exteriors 2015. Just you have to get up in the middle of the night and come out. And so I came out at 3 a.m. Chris finally came into the makeup trailer and Mike introduced us. I said, it's such an honor, Mr. Lloyd. I'm such a fan. He said, oh, thank you. And it kind of ended there. We just kind of stared at each other for a few minutes. And I said, okay, I got to go, because it was so awkward. He's very reserved if he doesn't know you. And then at that reunion that Claudia, Chris, and I did at the New Beverly, Chris and I were in the projectionist's booth for about 40 minutes. And we really broke the ice and started chatting. And I learned that he likes exotic plants. So when he was being feted up near where I live in the wine country, my wife ran and got this very lovely, rare B-52 red Venus flytrap. And when I presented it to him, he was in shock. Oh, he loved it. And the next time I saw him a few years later at London Film and Comic Con, I asked him, how's that Venus flytrap doing? And I killed it. I'm never home to water it. You know, and I remember at that Comic-Con in particular, Chris and I were having, oh no, I'm sorry, it wasn't that one. The next one with James Tolkien. James and I were having a coffee in the green room, and Leonard Nimoy came in. And Leonard and James had done a show directed by Otto Preminger. So Leonard came right to our table and sat down and started reminiscing. And I had to pinch myself. Here I was with Leonard Nimoy and James Tolkien doing their impressions of Otto Preminger and having a great time, a grand time. And I just loved it. And I wish at the time I realized that Leonard was an acting guru that I adore, Jeff Corey's assistant. I would have pried open the conversation more and really got to know Leonard a bit more. And he, of course, he was dead 2 years later. But nonetheless, these Comic-Cons have been a really lovely gift. And I've made friends with fans around the world, from Russia and Japan and oh my God, from Spain. One gentleman from Spain has come now 2 or 3 times to see me, to sign me his guitar that Marty plays, to present me with a George McFly T-shirt. I'll see him at the end of the month in New Jersey. He said he's coming. There's these wonderful Team Fox fundraisers fans from France and Italy and elsewhere that I will come and do a Zoom or autograph pictures that'll go towards their fundraising efforts. It's really quite rewarding because they kind of are, they embrace me, and I'm like their good friend, and I love that. I'm a very much a people person, and I believe that the world has got to get along with each other for us to survive. Absolutely. On that note,
well, thank you first of all for being, connected, with the fans, and I'm going to share all the dates of your upcoming conventions as well too. And
thank you.
Me personally, I want to talk to you for hours. There's so much I want to just, pick. You ran out of all these wonderful films that you're in, your experiences, and I can't thank you enough for.
I got dozens of more stories. I've talked for an hour, and I'm long-winded. I love it, and I have a lot more stories, and I have a lot more work to do.
Absolutely. We want to see it too.
I just wrapped a couple days on an independent film called Siblings. It was a very dark comedy, and it just felt so good to be back on set and working. I need to.
Absolutely, yeah, and we definitely want to save some room for round 2. So some of your upcoming projects, we want to be able to sneak you back in here. And Jeffrey, thank you so much. I literally felt like I was just back on the set of Back to the Future. You helped me relive my childhood during this interview, and can't wait to share with the rest of the fans. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, and I'll see you in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon. Take care.